Amazing Couples by Victor Yup and Doris Mock. Chapter 15. When Life Seems Unfair. Job chapter 1 verse 1 to chapter 2 verse 10. The year 2001 was a sad year for a family I had known for more than 10 years. The family was a staunch Christian family, and for 4 generations, the tight-knit family had served tirelessly in church. The matriarch of the family was a widow, and her 2 sons and only daughter were pioneers of 2 churches, and the sons served as deacons, were actively involved in 3 churches. Things began to unravel at the beginning of the year. The matriarch of the family died in April, and even though she died at a ripe old age, the death was a shock for the family. 3 months later, her daughter-in-law, who had suffered a stroke and had spent more than a year in a convalescent hospital, also died. And in a cruel twist of fate, the matriarch's daughter, Sue, suffered a mysterious illness about the same time her sister-in-law was buried. I visited Sue 10 days before she passed away. For a long time, she kept the news of her illness from friends. She was uneasy about how she looked, but was happy to see me. She was literally just half the person she used to be. 3 months after the last burial in the family, Sue passed away, and I was asked to give the benediction at her funeral service. After the service, the family told me how happy she was that I visited her before she passed away. They said that Sue had actually seen me at a restaurant when she could still walk, but she felt too embarrassed to approach me. Such are the inner guilt, social stigmas, and conflicted feelings that sometimes befall godly Christians and their families when faced with suffering. One of the most mesmerizing, puzzling, and unpopular passages in the Bible is, no doubt, the story of Job. Job was a moral, wealthy, and godly man. As the story unfolds, his life was likened to a bad movie script in which his children were like extras who died in the first scene, and the plot that followed resembled a boring screenplay of all dialogue and little action, with 2 chapters on tragedy and 40 chapters on philosophy. The word "only" in King James Version occurs 5 times in chapter 1, verses 12, 15, 16, 17, and 19, more than any chapter in the Bible. Most scholars believe that Job was a contemporary of Abraham or Isaac and lived before the Jewish nation was founded. Therefore, Job's account is the only biblical account of an individual stripped of cultural, national, or even Jewish ties. Job is a universal and personal story too, a story too close to home. It is easy to cry for Job, to sympathize and identify with him, because you may have gone through unspeakable pain and extreme suffering or know of someone who has. Job is a profile of courage in the face of adversity because Job did not give up on his character, give in to his pain, or give way to Satan. What are we to do when encountering adversity? How can we help others who are suffering? Why does God allow and not banish difficulty and even danger from our lives? First, be true in adversity. Job chapter 1 verse 20 to chapter 2 verse 3. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" So Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. The first thing Job did when life seemed unfair was to be true to his character and believe. He remained true to himself, true to form, and true to the end. Unknown to Job, God defended Job's innocence, praised his integrity, and flaunted Job's determination, feistiness, and toughness to Satan. The Chinese have a saying, "True gold is not afraid of fire." Do you know why gold is so expensive? Olympic athletes compete for the gold for a reason. I did a little research on gold and discovered some interesting facts on gold. Gold is a hedge against inflation, a popular form of savings, and a reliable asset during the worst times of economic uncertainty or political upheaval. Gold has a fairly high melting point of 1,945 degrees Fahrenheit. It is valuable because it is almost indestructible and has been used and then reused for centuries to the extent that all gold that is in existence today is almost equal to all the gold that has ever been mined. Gold is also a great metal for jewelry because it never rusts or tarnishes. Gold appreciates in value when more of it is present in the material. For example, 10K gold is the least expensive, and there is more gold and value in every additional 2K gold, from 10K up to 24K, which is 100% gold. Job was as good as 24K solid gold. He did not bend in his character, deviate from his character, or part with his character. The Hebrew word for the verb maintain, chapter 2, verse 3, has been used in a negative sense to describe the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, Exodus 7:13. But in the positive sense, it means strong, in the famous words, "Be strong and courageous," Deuteronomy 31:6, Joshua 1:6, 1 Chronicles 28:20, and 2 Chronicles 32:7. In a sense, Job was as headstrong and as thick-skinned as an ox. He was stubborn, uncompromising, and indomitable in faith despite Satan's larger-than-life presence and opposition. Satan is mentioned 7 times in chapters 1 and 2, more than in any other chapter in the Bible. Job did not move, budge, or retreat from his position, viewpoint, or stand. That was what drove Job's wife nuts in chapter 2, verse 9. The same word for Job's determination to maintain his integrity is next translated as holding on, chapter 2, verse 9. His wife said to him, "Are you still holding on to your integrity?" When his 3 friends accused him of harboring known and deliberate sins in his life, Job had the same fighting words for them. "I will never admit you are in the right. Till I die, I will not deny my integrity. I will maintain my righteousness and never let go of it. My conscience will not reproach me as long as I live." Job chapter 27, verses 5 to 6. God used an unusual word for Job's integrity to describe Job's character, chapter 2, verse 3. This word is found only in Job and Proverbs, 4 times in Job and once in Proverbs 11:3. Job upheld, pleaded, and maintained his innocence to the intimidating end. "Let me be weighed in an even balance, that God may know mine integrity." Job 31:6. The root word for integrity is derived from the Hebrew word for blameless in the same verse, 2 verse 3. No matter what others said, Job claimed innocence. He had an unyielding grip and a firm hold on his own innocence. The 3 words Job's friends could not believe he continually muttered were, "I was innocent." Job meant that he was morally innocent, not just ethically and legally innocent or not guilty. Job's claim infuriated his friends, caused a debate, and made others lose sympathy for him. His friends did not believe him, nor did they think it was possible, so they threw the book at him. Whether Job had a good attitude was not the focus or the point of the text. Second, be tenacious when afflicted. Job chapter 2, verse 4 to 8. Skin for skin, Satan replied. A man will give all he has for his own life. But stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, Very well, then he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. Someone has said, every winner has scars. I read that Romans at their peak distrusted most of the foreigners they had conquered and foreigners who wanted to fit in, but they admired battle scars and despised cowardly scars. The manly thing was to have battle scars on the front. To have scars on your back was a mark of shame. It showed that you had turned your back in battle and ran away, or worse, that you had been whipped. Only slaves were whipped. Alexander the Great, 356 to 323 BC, was one of history's most courageous and charismatic leaders. Any man in his army would lay down his life for Alexander in a heartbeat. As his enemies watched, Alexander would stand in front of his 35,000 troops before battle. Without saying a word, he would drop his toga to demand complete silence. Alexander was a strong and handsome man, but the front of his body was covered with battle scars because he always led his troops into combat. After displaying the scars on the front of his body, Alexander would turn around to show that he did not have a single scar on his back, proof that he had never retreated in battle. Following this display, his soldiers would let out a deafening cheer while hammering their shields and swords together in a frenzy. The enemy would quake, and the battle was won before it even started. The obstinate Job did not give in to his pain. Though he had painful sores from head to toe, verse 7, eating into his flesh and bones and waking him morning till night, he still did not give in or cave in to his pain. Pain was an enemy, but never a stranger to Job. Job did not ask for suffering, nor did he despise his suffering. Nobody has a higher tolerance of pain than Job. He did not hide his pain or grovel in his pain. With courage, he scraped himself with a piece of broken pottery, chapter 2, verse 8, to relieve the pain, the sore, and the itch in his body, while not letting out a murmur or a whimper from his mouth, nor displaying a growl or a frown on his face, or shedding a tear from his eye. The Hebrew word describing Job's sores, 2 verse 7, are similar to the plagues in Egypt, Exodus 9:10 and Deuteronomy 28:27, and for leprosy in the law, Leviticus 13 verses 18 to 20. Job not only did Job sit among the ashes, 2 verse 8, also he had become like dust and ashes, Job 30 verse 19. Rather than moan and groan, fuss and fret, he would rather use his energy, muster his courage, and still his body to save his strength, dull the pain, and quiet the mind, so that when the next sore stirred his body, pinched his nerves, or weakened his bones, he could still muster the last ounce of his strength to turn to his side, apply some pressure, and relieve the pain. Job demonstrated remarkable courage under the circumstances, under the weather, and under the onslaught. He passed the school of hard knocks with flying colors and graduated with the highest honors, making him the valedictorian to speak to all sufferers. Nobody understood him, not even his wife or his friends. Job cried out in his pain, but he did not give in to the pain. He was alone and lonely in his pain, yet he refused to buckle or break. He was discouraged with things, but not despondent of life. The patient Job was not bitter to the end or devoid of hope. He clung to life and hope even though he longed for death. When staring at death in the face, he did not blink. He cringed, but he did not cry, bravely fighting back tears of rage, pity, or shame. That's the essence of courage, an uprising against fear, pain, and suffering. Courage is a virtue that faces its sternest test against evil, injustice, or grievances. Third, be thankful under accusation. Job chapter 2, verse 9 to 10. His wife said to him, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." He replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Lucy, the wannabe money-making psychologist from the Peanuts gang, once put up her advice booth with the slogan, "Flawless Advice," written on it. Before too long, Charlie Brown walked in, sat down, and opened up. "My trouble is I never know if I'm doing the right thing. I need to have someone around who can tell me when I'm doing the right thing." Lucy had a ready response to his problem. "Okay, you are doing the right thing. That'll be 5 cents, please." Charlie Brown vacated the chair, paid the money, and left the place, but returned after a short while. Lucy was surprised to see him so quickly and said, "Back already? What happened?" Charlie Brown admitted with a downtrodden face, "I was wrong. It didn't help. You need more in life than just having someone around to tell you when you are doing the right thing." Lucy jumped up and eagerly concluded, "Now you have really learned something. That'll be another 5 cents, please." Someone has said life is a test. It is only a test. If it had been an actual life, you would have received instructions on where to go and what to do. Job shows us that we should resist Satan when we are tested. God called Job, who passed the sternest test with flying colors, "my servant," 6 times, Job 1:8, 2:3, 42:7, and 3 times in 42:8. God gave Job the highest honor. "There is none like him in all the earth." Chapter 1, verse 8, a statement reserved for God who is in heaven. Exodus 9:14. Job was sorely tested like no other. Satan's accusations have not changed much since. Do people fear God for no reason? I don't think so. What if godly people are not wealthy? What if they no longer have plenty? If natural disasters leave them friendless, their enemies get to them, they lose people dear to them and all they have saved. What if they lose the biggest wealth of all, their health? Would they still love you? Of course, Job did not serve God because God had put a hedge around him at all times, sheltered him from harm, or kept watch over him, his household, and his business, property, and livestock. He had feared and served and loved God unselfishly and unflinchingly, not for fame or reward, but for better or worse. Satan was wrong. Job did not merely fear God. He avoided evil. Chapter 2, verse 3. At the point when God withheld his blessings, not only did Job not spout evil, he said good things. He blessed the Lord, praised his name, and declared his goodness. Job was steadfast, stable, and single-minded in thanksgiving. There is an intentional play on the word take. The Sabeans and the Chaldeans were the ones who took away or carried off Job's livestock, Job 1:15 and 17. But Job saw the Lord's hand upon his life. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Verse 21. Job had a positive attitude. He was grateful for what he had, rather than what he had lost. At least he was rich and powerful ones. Job wrestled and argued with God, but he never blamed or challenged God. He was vocal, but never defiant. He lamented for God, but did not lambast against him. Job railed for help, but not against God. He tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell to the ground, but in reverent, humble, and urgent worship. Job 1:22 concluded that Job did not sin or charge God with wrongdoing. Job did not consider God his true enemy, blame him for innocent suffering, or fault him for not helping. He did not consider God's ways cruel, offensive, or irresponsible. Job focused on God's gifts instead of what was lost. Job asked, "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Chapter 2, verse 10. Conclusion. In the cosmic battle of good versus evil, when everything seems out of your hands and life seems unfair, unbearable, and unacceptable, we still have ample choices. We are not bystanders. With courage, we can participate actively with God to overcome evil with good, live triumphantly over obstacles, and reject the devil's lies. Notice it was God who initiated the discussion with Satan, Job 1:8, not the other way. In man's eye, he is naked, 1:21, and alone, but he is actually guarded and guided by God's watchful eye. Do you know God tempts no one with evil? James 1:13. That we can cast all our cares upon him. Praise God, he is faithful, and he will not allow us to be tempted beyond our limitations. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. Have you asked the Lord for humility, help, and honor when undergoing affliction and meeting antagonism? Bible study questions. Warm up. If you were to lose all your possessions today, what would be your reaction? If you were to lose your family in a car accident the same day, how would you react? Group study. 1. List all the characters in the passage. Who is Satan? Does Job know him? 2. What kind of a person is Job? Chapter 1, 1-8. What did he have? What is his most important distinctive? What doubts did Satan have about Job's fear of God? Chapter 1, verse 9-12, chapter 2, verse 3-5. What is Satan's limitation in his power? 1, verse 14, and 2, verses 5-6. 3. Where did Satan come from? Chapter 1, verse 6-7, and 2, verse 1-2. 4. Why is blasphemy of God a sin? 1, verse 20. What choice does a sufferer have? Why did God allow Job to suffer? 5. How did Job's family live their lives? 1 verse 4-5. How about his children? How did Job respond to suffering? 1 verse 20-22. How did his wife respond? 2 verse 9. How did Job reply to her? 2 verse 10. How does suffering affect our faith? How does Satan use suffering to attack people? 2 verse 4-5. How can a sufferer be like Job in the way he keeps his innocence? 2 verse 6-10. Compare 1. Satan's first attack, Satan's second attack. 2. Job's response to the first attack, Job's response to the second attack. 3. Job's understanding of God, Mrs. Job's understanding of God. Reflection. How do we as couples handle suffering together? From Doris, the psychologist's desk. Suffering can be a great trial, not only to the individual but also to one's marriage. Here, I am not referring to trials that are direct consequence of sin or transgression of a spouse, loss of a child. Having a child with chronic illness or disability can frequently strain a marriage. Severe illness or physical or mental of a spouse can also wear out the partner who is constantly the caretaker. Financial hardship or crisis can also be a great trial. A chronic situation is particularly trying because there is no foreseeable relief or escape from the situation, especially when there is no real hope for cure. Sometimes there is so much pain that a couple begin to blame each other to release their anger and hurt. The marriage vow commits the couple to go through trials together, rich or poor, sickness or health, and till death do we part. How can our marriages survive through these great trials? In Job's case, his wife was not asking for a divorce. Instead, she asked him to give up his integrity, his God, and thus his life. Fortunately, he was able to refute and rebuke his wife. We know that at the end, Job chapter 42, Job and his wife rebuilt their family together. How can couples go through severe trials together? I do not want to offer any pat answer. Here is what I learned from the experience of Job and his wife. 1. Ultimately, we commit our lives in God's sovereign will, our individual paths, as well as our marriage. We cannot keep our marriage vows without the grace of God. As a couple, we need to surrender to His sovereign will together. 2. Trusting God's intervention in His perfect timing. He does not abandon us into suffering, and Satan cannot harm us without God's permission. We need to hope in Him together. Sometimes we are in those moments when we want to give up, but we need to trust in God's intervention and the Holy Spirit's guidance. 3. Encounter God in our suffering. Although a couple is very much a team and a partnership, we also need to have our individual encounters with God in our suffering. Let us not be like Job's wife and tell our spouse how he or she should feel or act. And do not interfere with our spouse's relationship with God. We each need to receive our discipline from God. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 4 to 13. Sometimes silence may be better than discouraging words. This is not the silent treatment aiming to further punish the spouse. Rather, it is a quietness of the soul that involves empathic listening, journeying with your spouse through the trial to know God's love. There are no simple answers. Only God Himself can teach us through severe trials. I had cancer in 2000, and I can share with you that I have experienced the above 3 things with my husband. When you trust in God's sovereign will, He can turn everything into a blessing. We have a new encounter of God individually and as a couple that our lives are transformed. Here is what I shared in my blog during our wedding anniversary. When I first discovered I had breast cancer, I was initially quite worried for Victor. He had a difficult childhood without parental love and presence. I thought the threat of loss would trigger denial, withdrawal, and detachment. You can see this is a psychologist's thinking. As we faced the illness together, I was quite amazed to find that perhaps his wounds may have been healed. He may cope much better than I imagined. In the early days of our marriage, the Lord reminded me a few times that my task was to be His helper. Since then, I have tried my best to be faithful in loving Him, carefully protecting his vulnerabilities that stem from growing up in a broken home. As a pastor's wife, I also felt a stronger obligation to manage a lot of things to meet this good helper standard. In early January this year, we were teaching a Sunday school class, Couples in the Bible Together. When preparing for lessons and reflecting on our marriage, I recalled feeling that I could not do any better as a helper and that our marriage was as good as it can be. I noted and was therefore thankful that when the Lord instructed me to be a faithful helper, He has used the process to shape me. Slowly, I have become more loving and less self-focused, narcissistic. The love and stability in our relationship supports Victor and me to develop his or our potential and become the best he or we can be. When cancer hit home in late March, I was pleasantly surprised to find that our marriage can always be better since growth in the Lord's love is without limits. As we explore sickness, aging, and death together, I discovered Victor's strength. I can depend on him to care for me. Plus, he is my helper too, and he has showed willingness to take over a lot of things that used to be my responsibilities. In my weakness, it brings out the best in him as well. In our daily lives, our marriage is much like by our wedding anniversary. It is not that romantic. Yet we are thankful to the Lord. Our marriage has been good. The blessing of marriage is really not simply being happily married. God puts us together so that we may love one another, and in the process, we bring out the best in each other in all circumstances. I pray that the love of God is in the innermost of your marriage, and by loving each other, you become the best you can be. Group sharing. 1. Share either A. An experience of a trial that has strengthened your marriage, or B. An experience when the trial has strained your marriage. 2. Share with the group how our faith in God makes a difference. 3. Discuss how, as a fellowship group, we can support couples going through severe trials and encourage them. Group leader may choose to have a designated group member sharing a testimony or experience. Also, consider examples of trials before we know the Lord and trials we go through in the Lord together. Couples sharing. Explore a trial you have been through together. What were the forces that pulled you apart? What were the forces that pulled you together? If you were believers during the trial, how did you experience God? Share how you can support each other differently in the face of trials. Share how you can seek outside support from brothers and sisters, family and friends in future trials. Share how you can support others going through trials similar to those you have experienced.